can you summarize for us what is Sayrami's take overall on these broad events?
Sayrami's take is really that of a pretty traditional Muslim historian who has no patron and is very free to turn a critical eye on the events of his world and of his lifetime. Fundamentally, he says, he frequently cites a passage of the Quran that tells us very simply, God places the crown of kingship upon the head of whom he will. And he takes that crown from the head of whom he will. And Sayrami makes it very, very clear. It's like the relationship between a shepherd and the flock. The shepherd doesn't own the flock. God is the owner of the flock. And the shepherd must be just and must respect the Sharia and must respect the boundaries and the practices of the Muslim community. So what does Sayrami say? He says that previously, the Qing emperors always respected Islam. They allowed Muslims to live as Muslims. And he kind of creates a legend suggesting that the emperors of China are especially protected by God because since time immemorial, they've always protected Islam and Islamic practice. But he sets this up in order to say that, well, in 1864, why did the Muslim uprisings break out? Because the new emperor ceased to protect Islam. And therefore, God took the crown of kingship from the emperor's head, and he placed upon the head of 𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗍, a military officer from Central Asia who establishes a state. But Sayrami says 𝗏𝗏𝗍𝗍 grows tyrannical, and he takes the crown of kingship from 𝗏𝗏𝗍's head. 𝗏𝗏𝗍 dies, and a new emperor who's capable of producing justice for the common people arrives, and so God gives the crown back to this emperor of China. Sayrami also suggests that the emperor of China might secretly be a Muslim, which is a really interesting detail that he has strategically, I think, in order to suggest that, of course, Muslim power is coming back. Sorry, Chinese power is coming back. Because from a certain perspective, Chinese power is legitimate. It could be Muslim. It definitely has the capacity to produce justice. Mm-hmm. And so part of what Sayrami is doing is he's comparing the different empires around him, the different sources of legitimacy and the different rulers to say, okay, who is actually making justice for the commoners? Sayrami was a tax collector. And Sayrami talks about managing a granary. He talks about how farmers suffered under one form of overtaxation or another. He's very concerned with the welfare of the common people. But he also invokes an old trope of Islamic Central Asian discussions of kingship, which is astrology. So he wonders, okay, how is it that if the house of the emperors of China has always been legitimate since time immemorial, they've always been protected by God, why is it that in 1864 things got so bad that the Muslims had to rise up? Well, he says, the emperor of China was born under an unlucky star. And so the emperor, he's wondering, because in the middle of the 19th century, China was in chaos. There's invasions from multiple foreign forces, multiple uprisings. China was in a state of civil war, and everyone knew it. According to Sayrami, the emperor asks his dream interpreters and he asks his astrologers to determine what the problem is. And they say, you have a bad astrological chart. And until you go under the ground, China will never be at peace again. And so this emperor fakes his death. He goes under the ground, according to the story, and then raises his little cousin up onto the throne. That's a Guangxu emperor. And the Guangxu emperor is capable of producing justice. Therefore, the land is restored. So he has multiple, and these are just a couple of them, but there are multiple explanations for why power rises and falls. And in many ways, he's fitting the Qing case, or the Chinese case, into a broader scheme that was used by Central Asian historians for centuries, initially to explain the rise of Mongol power and rule over Muslims. Yeah. And then, of course, to explain a different form of what looked to him like Mongol power, which was Qing power.